Just a little background on the current Medicare model. I've been in the business since 1981. Professor Corbett, when he needed a wheelchair or he needed services, a ventilator, he was able to choose a provider. Now, he may have gone to his doctor or the hospital, someone in the hospital, and said, who should I use, who would you recommend? But they were able to choose from any provider. If Longs didn't do such a stellar job, Professor Corbett right now would be able to say, I don't want to use Longs anymore, I'm going to another company, any other company in the phone book that chooses to do business in Columbia you can choose from. Any provider could take care of Dr. Corbett. Right now, Medicare patients are free to choose the provider they choose from, and the providers are free to choose to participate in the system. Medicare pays the provider, those of us in the business, a fixed fee. They set the prices. They go up and they go down, but mostly in the recent days they've gone down. We look at challenges coming forward and we see more reimbursements coming, but it's based on their fee schedule. They set the prices and we choose to participate with or without, or based on the current prices. Patients, like I say, may choose. If they choose to, they just don't care for the service of that company anymore, then they're free to move elsewhere. Under the Medicare Modernization Act of 2003, it was mandated by Congress that Medicare replace that current system based on a low bid contract. Is the model they wanted to go to. The lowest bid model is currently being implemented. This is not something that's down the road. This is something they've done a couple little trials with, a couple little studies with, but right now, providers in South Carolina are bidding to provide services to folks in York County and the Charlotte area. So this is real and it's happening, and it's coming very soon to the majority of the rest of the state, at least certainly the populated areas of the rest of the state. Medicare will contract with a very limited number of providers in a geographic area. Contracts will be awarded to the lowest bidders. They have certain formulas, they have to meet certain criteria, just like we all do now, accreditation and bonding and things like that, insurance. But at the same time, the lowest bidder is the one that wins. There may be a group of low bidders, it may be 3, 4, or 5, but there will be a small group of bidders. Patients will have to choose amongst that small number of bidders. Non-contracted companies, if my company were to lose the bid, I wouldn't be able to take care of Professor Corbett. If Longs lost the bid, they would lose their ongoing relationship with Professor Corbett. We think that the title of the program, as Congress has dubbed it competitive bidding, is actually very uncompetitive or anti-competitive. During the 2008 trial, the vast majority of providers were totally shut out of the system. In fact, 90% of companies, qualified home medical equipment companies, were excluded from the system. That's 4,200 small businesses. We feel this model is going to lead to business failures. We're certain of it because Medicare is such a huge percentage of each company's business. We also know that there will be a lot of local job losses. In the trial in Charlotte, in the short period it happened there, thankfully it was stopped within 2 weeks, but when it was tried in 2008, the majority of, or a good half of the winners were either unlicensed in the area, they were non-local in the Charlotte area. There's no requirement, as we heard today from the representatives from Medicare, that you don't have to actually be in Charlotte or be in Columbia to take care of patients in Columbia. You can win the bid from companies in Ohio and Florida, as they did last time. Companies that are inexperienced, they may be on TV every day providing power wheelchairs, may become one of the biggest providers of oxygen, which they haven't done in the past. We're very concerned about that. We feel that this program restricts patient access, patient choice, patient service, and it's going to be very bad for small businesses. We're advocating for a bill that was introduced by Kendrick Meek, Congressman out of Florida. It's H.R. 3790. It has broad bipartisan support. In the short time it's been on the floor, it's garnered almost 60 co-sponsors. It will ensure that millions of Americans who rely on home-based care will have continuing access to quality care. It eliminates competitive bidding. It eliminates the model that has been proposed, but it helps control Medicare spending because it comes back to our industry, and over a period of time, we are going to endure a series of cuts to return the majority of the money that Medicare forecasts they're going to save on this program. They will also save from the administration of this complex system. Taking this nationwide and having individual bidders and managing that over time, and companies that go out of business and having to bring a bidder back in is going to be very complex. So it'll save all the administrative costs of that, and patients like Professor Corbett will be able to continue their relationships. Are there any questions there, or anyone else like to make a comment? Walt, would you like to make a comment?
Issues that we face in Washington is that when we do try to engage consumers and beneficiaries, there is a tendency to say that we are using scare tactics. For example, if you cut my oxygen payments, me, the provider, is not going to be able to provide the same level of service. And obviously, if you're talking to someone who's 70, 78 years old, woman, frail, elderly, how can you engage and develop patients and make them your patient advocates?
That's an excellent question, and I can say the answer to that is with great difficulty. And the reason it's difficult, and this is just as true of younger patients as it is older patients, is that they're very easily intimidated. And there's a subtle factor of fear that enters into it. I'd better not do this, or Medicaid will cut me off. I've got to be very careful here. So there's an atmosphere that is innately created by regulation that creates a reluctance to speak up. I'm kind of an exception, I suppose. I've always been a fighter. That's the only reason I survived polio, for crying out loud. And I've been involved in the disability movement for, what, 40 years or more? So the answer, partial answer to your question is this, threefold. Number one, make sure you understand that there are some very fine, legitimate organizations who are in the business of advocacy. The one that comes to mind is one called Persons with, let's see,
AAPD.
Protection and Advocacy for Persons with Disabilities. I got it right. Used to be the OP&A system. I know that because I was board chairman for 9 years. And that organization is not afraid to speak up. And so if you can link a customer, a neighbor, if you will, with that organization, which is headquartered here in Columbia, right on Forest Drive, that is one way you can do it. Secondly, there are a limited number of advocacy groups that are around. Some are very strong, some are kind of weak. But they're divided along disability lines, and so there's no unity, no coherence to the movement. What made the civil rights movement for African Americans so successful back in the 60s was the high degree of unification that took place. Because the bond was color. That's what brought everybody together. But you see, I, as a post-polio, won't bond very easily with a spinal cord injury type person, or diabetic, or maybe a C5 quadriplegic or something of that nature. You see, it's much more difficult. One is the South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association. Is pretty good. It has fairly decent leadership. Excuse me. And that would be a good organization. So if you can link your clients, your customers, to those types of organizations, that is one way to do it. Now, in terms of trying to persuade an individual or to enlighten a patient about this, the best that you can do is just make them aware of what's going on, give them factual information, whatever you may have, and ask them to get in touch with their representative, like I did.
That's a good, I think we haven't tried the issue of trying to link them. We work with those other consumer organizations, but we haven't made that next step of linking or trying to push HME providers to reach out to their patients to join those organizations. So that's a good idea.
I think that would be very useful. Get in touch with the P&A system with Gloria Provost.
Okay, I'll call you.
P-R-O-V-O-S-D. Tell I sent you.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.